The Subaru Forester and Outback are some of the best all-around cars in their respective segments, but their similar price, feature set, and powertrain begs the question, which one is better? Today, I'll try to help you find out. For 2023, the Forester is basically unchanged, whereas the Outback has received a refresh. This is going to include updated styling, better tech, active safety feature enhancements, along with an Onyx edition that comes without the turbocharged engine, allowing for a very strong value proposition. And that's where I'd like to start, at the differences between these two. Briefly, if you enjoy fun, detailed car content without fluff, consider subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications. The Outback is roughly $2,000 more expensive than the Forester in most outfits, though they take distinctly different approaches and have their own advantages, especially on the road. While they carry the same main trims as one another, the Outback adds the Onyx that adds helpful things like more durable StarTex faux leather seating, a full-size spare, and little accents to help make you feel cool. While the Forester doesn't get the Onyx, it does get the mildly goofy, street-oriented sport trim that also tries to implement more swagger into its step. Though it doesn't really carry any functional upgrades like the extremely silly yet impressive Wilderness trim that you will find on both of these cars. So that's going to give you more underbody protection and give each a more aggressive final drive ratio, along with a whole host of other things, including longer springs and shocks with mild all-terrain tires. On the outside, the Forester is about 8.5 inches shorter than the Outback, a couple inches taller and roughly the same width. This gives it a boxier silhouette, but also better approach and departure angles in all specs than the Outback, even though technically the Outback Wilderness has a little bit more ground clearance than the equivalent Forester, which is notably elevated for a crossover. I will catch flack for this, but the Forester Wilderness earns my style crown between the two. Let me know which one you think looks better in the comments section. While I am thankful the Forester can still easily slot under 30 grand, that base trim looks as naked as dry bones with either the hubcaps or optional alloy wheels, and it does not have the hatch spoiler or roof rails too, giving the entry-level Outback the leg up. To get back to the more objective things, we have a few differences in features. So the premium trim Forester will come with proximity unlock and lock as standard, whereas that's an option on the premium Outback. Both will also have steering responsive LED headlights with LED daytime running lights as standard. And the wagon also has cooler roof rails. They actually swing out, so when you're not using them, they don't make any noise on the highway, and if you suddenly need them, they can deploy very rapidly. No matter which one you're searching for, if you don't want to overpay, consider Royal on the Eastside in Bloomington, Indiana, the friendly, knowledgeable dealership that has let me test drive countless new and used Subarus over the years. Check them out and tell them thanks for me. Another big difference between these two is the cargo shape. The Forester is going to give you a taller, more box-like space, whereas the Outback makes it notably longer. Subaru says you'll get about 5 inches more behind the front row in the Outback than the Forester, and it depends on what you're carrying the most, but I think the Forester may be a little bit more versatile due to a wider opening and the ability to fit taller objects. But the Outback, once again, has nicer touches because every trim will have rear seat releases, whereas you have to opt for the upper half of trims in order to get that in the Forester. We also see very different approaches to the interior. Let's start with the infotainment. The Forester keeps it very traditional. You have a 6.5-inch screen on the lower half of trims, whereas the top half of things will get an 8-inch screen. The resolution is better there, but either way you go, this is not very impressive. The response time ranges from slow to okay, but the layout is at least simple, and I like that the Forester retains buttons and dials for pretty much every control in here. You also have a separate screen up here that shows more driving data. Every Forester will have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but none of them will have it wireless. And if you go with the base trim, you're stuck with just 4 speakers, which kind of makes the thing sound like it's shouting at your feet. And the same applies to the base Outback. For both cars, the mid-specs will add tweeters to make for an acceptable listening experience. There is a 9-speaker Harman Kardon sound system that adds a subwoofer too. That bumps power but isn't too crisp at high volumes. The Outback adds 3 more speakers and has better insulation to make for a more rich sound. I also think this has more rugged, durable feeling materials, maybe a little bit cheaper too. And the fit and finish also isn't like great. Why did I say it like that? And the fit and finish is also not exactly great, but it seems like something that will stand the test of time. And they also do include some level of padding around where your knees will rest. Plus, when it comes to features, the Forester will get most of what the Outback has, though some of it is only delegated to the top trim, like the face scanning thing, which can both tell you that you're looking away from the road, but also recognize who is driving. And this allows for it to function as an automatic memory seat and mirror feature. And unlike the Outback, the touring trim will not have ventilated seats. And you also have a more traditional SUV driving position, which I think is just not as relaxing as what you'll find in the other Subi. At least all Foresters but the base have an 8-way power adjustable driver's seat with lumbar adjustment. I find that to be comfortable, lightly bolstered, and easy to live with. I think Subaru did a good job of adding a little dash of personality in here with the different textured materials, the stitching throughout, especially on the sport trim, and the kind of funky lines. One big pro to the Forester in general is going to be a big back seat. Again, I am 6'3". I fit in the front and back with no problems, and I'm comfortable too, though I will say I think I had better support in the Outback. And so long as you don't get the base trim, you will have rear vents, rear USB ports, and the ability to recline the seat back just a little bit. The Forester also has freakishly wide opening rear doors, but the Outback manages more rear headroom due to the smaller sunroof. Console vents and USB ports will come on everything except for the base. They actually add some USB-C ports too. The seats themselves are very comfortable, supportive, and there's also plenty of legroom for someone over 6 feet tall to sit in the front and second row with no problem. Plus, all models can recline the rear seats back just a little bit. On the inside of the Outback, you're going to have a more clean, elegant design. It's considerably less busy, which doesn't inherently make it better or worse, but I will say there are nicer touches. There's better and more padding where your knees rest. Softer materials cover more of the dash. It also has a giant touchscreen that is not really any better than the setup there, except now it's bigger and encompasses more features. At least Subaru was wise enough to give you, physical buttons for the defrosters and to quickly change your temperature, and they left the volume and tune dials, but I still think that this kind of full screen setup is really best used in a car that has a more sophisticated, quicker reacting, and higher resolution screen. Its biggest pro is that it's pretty easy to understand. All Foresters and Outbacks get analog gauges with a simple multi-function display and a really pleasant steering wheel. It'll be leather on the premium trims, but they all have easy to use matte finished buttons. Now, one thing that the Forester has a big leg up on is sunroofs. You have a panoramic sunroof standard on everything except for the base trim, whereas here you have a small sunroof that's an option on most specs. But the Outback offers a couple new things for 23. One, the Touring adds a digital mirror function, and two, all cars with the 11.6-inch screen get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. If you go with the base spec, you will actually get a dual 7-inch, and while I don't hate the screens themselves, I think the way that they implemented it into the dash just looks out of place. But something that I will never complain about are these seats. They are very well contoured to my body. The bolstering is present but not too aggressive. They're soft, and if you get a premium or touring, the driver will get an extendable cushion, which improves the seats. They were already supportive, but with this addition, it makes the driver's seat here probably the most comfortable one that I've found in a car under $50,000. Under the hood of the standard Subaru Outback, you're going to have a 2.5-liter naturally aspirated Boxer 4. It's direct injected and makes 182 horsepower with 176 pound-feet of torque, and that sounds just as middling as it really is. Though if I'm being honest, for most people, this would be the right powertrain to get with a Subaru Outback. All Outbacks will also have a continuously variable transmission, and this allows for very smooth acceleration. It tends to work well in the background. Step on it and it will half-ass a few fake shifts here and there. That way it doesn't go full lawnmower unless it's under full throttle. The only part where this really will lag behind is kind of an initial bite, especially down low if you're trying to accelerate hard, but it does not lurch like what I found some of the old Subaru CVTs to do. All of this can also be said about the new Foresters as well, because this is the same engine and transmission in there, though there's one difference, and that would be the Outback has a more aggressive final drive ratio. Maybe this is to help tackle the extra weight, but I should also let you know this has slightly taller wheels, kind of negating some of that extra gearing. When it comes to outright performance, I found this thing to manage high 8-second 0 to 60 runs. But if you want your Outback to accelerate effortlessly, get the turbocharged XT version, which is available on the Onyx, Limited, Touring, and Standard on the Wilderness. That's going to make 260 horsepower and a full 101 pound-feet more torque than the standard 2.5.
Still off the line, not very much, but man, oh wow.
With that motor, I've gotten this thing to 60 in 5.8 seconds. And keep in mind, that's with a slow CVT launch. It really pulls hard from like 30 to 60 miles per hour. And it does that while still getting good gas mileage, though some people report lower than the EPA figures. If you don't need thrust to challenge a WRX, the 2.5 handles hills with ease. This is thanks in part to the responsive but unenthusiastic by nature CVT. I like that, you know, no matter what, going up a hill, it always changes the ratio before it starts to lug the engine. Bringing this thing up to speeds of 65 miles per hour, even past that, is not difficult. This is enough power, at least when you're not in a very high elevation scenario. I'm sure that will make this thing feel easy. 65 miles per hour, we're cruising right around 1800 RPMs. This is a serene vehicle on the highway, and you have a car-like driving position, so my legs are kind of stretched out further. Taking this thing around corners, you have an advantage because of the boxer engine. It has a little bit lower center of gravity, so they can spring this softer while still giving you respectable handling chops. There's still, you know, a fair amount of body motion, but it's more so average for the class. And you know, you do have steering here that is numb, but it feels precise. And this is kind of a common complaint for Subarus. There's just a little bit of vagueness on center with this thing, making something like a Mazda CX-50 feel a little bit more predictable or natural. So while this isn't the most engaging car to drive on a back road in the class, it is probably the most comfortable because it has a soft suspension, yet remains very composed and controlled over bad roads. It feels like you could hit the oldest, most wretched, rim-destroying pothole without your spine paying the price. Which really helps me understand why this is probably such a great car for mountain living. And a lot of people have already caught on to that. This is also great in the mountains for its all-wheel drive system. This is going to apply to both of them. It is Subaru's active all-wheel drive. So that uses a wet clutch of sorts in the center that splits power front and back constantly. This is a full-time system, and it can divert well more than 50% of torque to the rear wheels and is constantly changing the torque split, but it will tend to rest with a 60-40 split front rear. With the Outback, every model comes with X mode, an off-road setting that tries to simulate a locked center diff and uses the brakes to shuffle power side to side. This only works at low speeds. Onyx and Wilderness specs gain a second X mode, dubbed Deep Snow and Mud, which allows for more wheel spin. And it also locks you into a low ratio if you're going up a steep grade in the Wilderness trim, to further help you crawl up tough obstacles. And when it comes to visibility, Subaru is known to have pretty low windows. The Outback is far from intimidating to drive, but the Forester takes it up like another 2 levels. The Forester has giant windows and a low dash, making it feel more like you're sitting on top of the car rather than in it. These two have polar opposite driving positions. You're gonna have the same engine in the Subaru Forester, but there is no option for a turbo. Here, we're a little bit lighter with that different final drive ratio, and it feels, well, very similar. Still a refined yet unenthusiastic powertrain. There are a few other tweaks like SI drive, allowing you to choose a sport mode that gives you a sharper response. X mode availability is altered too. I also found the Forester more inclined to fake shift regardless of mode, which could explain why I tend to find this to be a little slower. I got 0 to 60 in 9 seconds here, but with the Wilderness I got 8.7. Throwing the Forester through corners comes off a little bit more nimble. This could be because it is considerably shorter, just a touch firmer ride, and that also could help with the quicker reaction time there because these do have the same steering ratio. The steering, just like the Outback, is also numb, but it is still very confidence-inspiring. Both are weighted on the light side, making them easy to chuck around city streets. Taking it through rough, windy corners here, yeah, I do want to say the suspension may be a little bit firmer, but that helps it handle even better than the Outback when it comes to body motion. Though if you also prioritize a forgiving ride, I don't see the Forester letting you down. The Outback is just a little bit more posh. The brakes of the Forester seem to be tuned a little bit differently, kind of has more of a firm feel. Bringing the Forester up to highway speeds is not a stressful process. The engine definitely pronounces itself, though it's not offensive. And the same can be said about wind noise. It's there, it's more than in the Outback, but it feels competitively quiet and much more so than the previous gen Forester. So if you're upgrading from that car, this is a big improvement. If you're cruising at 65 miles per hour, this thing is going to fluctuate right below 2,000 RPMs, but you give it just a touch of gas at all and it'll change the ratio. The powertrain is never caught off guard, somewhat linear, but far from athletic, which is why I still wish they would introduce the 2.4 liter turbo for this gen Forester. If you like having a surplus of passing or merging power, the 2.5 will likely disappoint, though I think most compact crossover buyers won't bat an eye. Another small disadvantage to the Forester when it comes to highway driving is that it does have a gas tank that's a couple gallons shy of what's in the Outback. And gas mileage between the two are identical. The Wilderness Outback and Wilderness Forester, though, will get substantially worse gas mileage. One pro to Subarus that's been hit or miss has been reliability. I'll link individual reviews where I talk about this more, but Subaru has gone through and addressed problems of the past. These have been much more reliable the last 5 or 6 years, with smaller issues like spontaneously cracking windshields, weak batteries, and buggy infotainment being the most consistent problems. There are other issues that have warranted recalls on each. Overall, it seems the Forester has had a little less woes, especially because of the powertrain control module problem with the turbo Outback. That was recalled and should be fixed, but I'm glad that Subaru at least offers a naturally aspirated version. That way, if you want something less complicated or under less stress, you can still get it. Another thing, the Subaru Forester is built in Japan while the Outback is built in Indiana, if that's something that you care about. I would recommend either of these to someone who prioritizes reliability, and same goes with safety. But the Outback does notably better with the updated crash tests. Both also have the latest eyesight sensors and provide a similar list of active safety and convenience features, with blind spot monitoring available on the premium, standard onward. The Outback Touring for $23 does add a third sensor to better read pedestrians and intersections. All things considered, I personally find the Outback to warrant its higher price tag, and it's the car I would take home. But the best thing about these two is their differences. They share a platform and powertrain but disagree on everything else. Materials, driving position, tech, specific features, suspension, cargo packaging, style, and so on. Other brands offer two models that could easily be cross-shopped, but I think Subaru does a phenomenal job at giving each a distinct yet compelling argument. Like when a mother says you're both special but means it. If you want a confident, highly versatile, more nimble Subaru SUV with a straightforward, airy approach to the interior, go Forester and save some money. Prefer something more luxurious, softer with added tech and a turbo option? The Outback has your back. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then hit the like button to help me crack the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe and hit the bell for more. And thank you to my loyal patrons. I'll catch you in the next one.